Good evening, everyone. Uh, we just put this on silent. Okay, sorry about that. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome you to Advocata Studio Special Edition. And today we are going to actually touch upon a very crucial subject which has a direct impact on Sri Lanka's economy, and especially with our export earnings and especially the jobs in the apparel sector. And that is obviously it's a GSP plus. And today we are going to talk about how it's going to impact Sri Lanka and what Sri Lanka can do to retain GSP plus. And Professor Rohan Samarajiva, Chair of Learn Asia, is with us. So, Professor Samarajiva, I welcome you to the show. My first question is, Professor, can you give a brief outlay of what actually GSP Plus is? Because GSP Plus, we had it in the past, because I remember in 2010 we lost it, and the apparel sector got pretty badly hit. And then in 2017 we got it back. I think 2017 May I think we got it back.
January was when we had the agreement signed.
And you get the due process that goes with that. And I think in either April or May we got it back, and we are still running with it. And GSP Plus has a huge impact on Sri Lanka, especially the apparel sector, because we have.
And I believe fish exports.
Okay.
For some reason, that actually got
really
worked out even before 2017.
Okay.
That was one of the first achievements of the Yahapalana government was freeing up the fish.
Yes.
Exports.
So it was basically the apparel sector. Then we had tires.
Yep.
And then fish. So, but anyhow, that is a significant proportion of Sri Lanka's exports, and I think a lot of jobs actually depend on it. So, Professor, if you can give a brief outlay how GSP Plus, how we got GSP Plus, and how we lost GSP Plus, and how we got it back.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the European Union is a very rigid bureaucracy. They are not like Donald Trump. They are sort of very procedure-oriented. And they have these standard rules that are applied to their trade, to international trade. Now, GSP Plus is an exception. That's the first thing we have to understand. It's a plus. So that means that for certain countries, 8 countries that meet certain specified criteria, they're giving a sort of additional concession. And that concession doesn't come free. It comes with certain obligations on the part of those 8 countries.
So it comes strings attached.
Okay. Right?
And a lot of strings attached.
I would say a significant number, but let me qualify that.
Okay.
I don't think they're very bad. I mean, there are many people who say, why do they want to connect what we do about human rights, etc. What they're saying is, you want to play here. There are these international conventions that you have signed.
Yeah.
Implement them. Take them seriously. Don't just sign it and keep it aside. I mean, we do that in Sri Lanka, right? I mean, for anybody who's aware, I mean, just walk the streets of Colombo. If you're on a wheelchair, you cannot navigate Colombo. But we have signed the International Convention on the Rights of the Disabled. We have signed it about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And we do nothing to actually live by the promises that we have made.
Right.
So it's like that. So in the case of Sri Lanka, there's a specific mention of our prevention of terrorism, our terrorism legislation, having to be made consistent with our international treaty obligations. That is, if you look at ICCPR Section 9, there are 6 criteria, and if you look at those 6, anybody can see that we don't meet them. Our law is contrary to them. So that one is specifically mentioned. So because the rest of it is, I think, applies to Pakistan and Kyrgyzstan and Philippines.
Philippines is there.
Philippines, all these other countries that are in that category of 8. India is not. We are in. Bangladesh is also not, I think.
No, Bangladesh is not.
Yeah. So that's common to all these countries, except that this specific mention is there. Now, I was having an exchange of views with Dr. Harsha De Silva, who as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mangala Samarajiva was the minister.
At that time, yeah.
He was sort of the lead person. He was in Europe negotiating with the European Parliament because there had been a motion brought up in the European Parliament that we shouldn't be given it. Because you must remember, once we lost it in 2010,
Yeah.
there were a number of interest groups that didn't want us to get it back.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, there were certain Tamil diaspora groups that didn't want us to get it. Labor interests moved the resolution, so they actually had to defeat that resolution. And it had been defeated by quite a significant margin. So that's sort of how the game got played out in 2017 January, I believe.
Yeah.
So he was saying that they made certain commitments, and that he had personally carried, or the government had submitted in 2017 itself, the new counter-terrorism legislation.
Okay.
Trying to respond to trying to keep the promise that they made, but they couldn't get it done because then you come into the local council elections in 2018 early, then you had the coup, anti-constitutional coup and so on, and the government sort of got into disarray and they couldn't finish the job.
Yeah.
The fact remains that we made certain promises in 2017 and now it's 2025. That's a long time.
In 8 years, the promises have not been met.
Not been met.
Right. Okay.
That's the issue.
Right. But Professor, if you kind of look at it, I mean, the economic impact is as expected, it will be massive, right?
I would say it's significant because we experienced the problem in 2010 and we lived to tell the tale. I mean, the country didn't completely crash.
Yeah. But then again,
the question is, this is happening at a bad time. So our largest export market, particularly for apparel, is the US. Second largest market is the EU. So now the US is in disarray, and US we are already hurting because we got 10% extra tariff imposed. So in that context, the EU business becomes extremely important. While one could argue that we could kind of write this one out if it was just the EU alone, the problem is it's not the EU alone. It's like the whole international environment is shaky. And if we get hit on the number one market and the number two market, then we are talking about real dire straits. That's, I think, how we need to look at this. We can't afford to take that second punch because we don't know what's going to happen with the first one.
Right. But Professor, if you look at the context, as what you very rightly said about what we can technically call the double whammy, the US and the EU, do you think there's any outstanding chance that because there is a problem going on with President Trump and all that, which the whole world is facing, that the EU might kind of delay this?
Well, you could say that they kind of delayed it because of COVID. Then they kind of delayed it because of the economic crisis.
Yeah.
Right? And even this time, the mission, I looked at their statement, the pressure isn't extreme. It's sort of like, really, you guys should do something about it, but it's not like, you do this or else, kind of. You don't get that hard language. The issue, according to, again, I'm quoting Dr. Harsha De Silva, what he says is that we have to reapply in 2026.
Right.
It's a sort of standard procedure, the way the EU works. This doesn't just go on. So this was supposed to have expired in 23, they have extended it. Now we have to reapply in 2026. And when you reapply, the European Parliament with about 600 MPs, all MEPs. Kinds of lobbying going on, all these things will come into play. So at that point, it's possible. I mean, that seems to be Sri Lanka's argument, right? I mean, even in a letter to President Trump or to the US government, we said, take a look at us, have pity on us. We had this, we just come out of, massive economic crisis. Have pity on us. I'm not sure, that is the best. I would mention that, but I wouldn't make that my central plank of my argument. I wouldn't make that
your trump card. Yeah, absolutely. Because the thing is, Sri Lanka has a history of going with the begging bowl. and it has been happening for a very long
Yeah.
time, where it after a while it actually starts to kind of wear
Yeah.
people out,
Yeah.
and it becomes, so. Professor, what would you say would be the best way to kind of for the government? Now we have a new government in power, which has absolute majority in parliament. What would you say is the best course of action for the government to take to make sure that we secure that we secure GSP plus?
See, about I think 20 something years ago, even I had the privilege. I really thought it was a great honor. The foreign ministry gives you a piece of paper with a red seal and a stamp and the works, right? So you go and you represent your country. You negotiate on behalf of your country, right? Back then we had a kind of reputation. I'm talking about 1999 or 98. We had a reputation. I mean, we always paid our dues in the international bodies. We were not.
We never defaulted.
We never defaulted. I mean, we were a good country.
Yeah.
And we were respected. I mean, we were poor, we were small, but we
Yeah.
sort of proper international actors. Unfortunately, that has gone down. We no longer have that.
Okay.
Right? We don't have that credibility that comes from being a sort of proper dues paying, honorable,
Good global citizen.
good global citizen. So, because of that, I have been of the opinion, and I have written this several times, in a large number of areas, I would say that the best negotiating technique is to take a high profile thing and just do it. So, what I said is, even before the crisis, or when we were going into the crisis or coming out of it, I was saying, let's take Sri Lankan Airlines and privatize the damn thing.
Yeah.
It'll make headlines, it'll give a good signal to all the debt holders that this country is serious, right? So, what I'm saying is, actions speak louder than words.
Absolutely.
So, what I would like is an action, and the obvious action is the Prevention of Terrorism Act,
Okay.
which was brought in for 3 years, and it has been there for like 40 years.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not rocket science to get rid of it. It's very simple.
Yeah.
I mean, even I can draft the law that'll repeal it.
And Professor, you need a simple majority in Parliament, right, for that? You
Just
don't
to
need-
repeal it.
Yeah, repeal it, right? Yeah.
Right? So, and this government basically said it's an in their manifesto,
Yeah.
they said it's an oppressive act. I mean, they are people who have suffered
From the most.
from
yeah.
that.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
They suffered under that. Well, I don't know whether the most. I think the Tamil.
Oh, yeah, that probably is. Yeah,
they suffered more.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, there were huge hordes of large numbers, hundreds of Muslim people who got nailed under the PTA and were held
Absolutely, yeah.
after the Easter bombings.
Easter bombings, yes.
But these are people who experienced it, right? So it's relatively easy for them to do it. For some reason, and I mean, I have some information about why they are not doing it that way. They don't seem to be going on the repeal path.
Okay.
But that's okay.
Okay.
We can live with that.
Yeah.
But then you need to deliver a significantly different new law that is compliant with the international treaties that we have been members of for many, many years.
Okay.
Compliant.
Okay.
They have appointed a committee to do this.
Okay.
So they must have told the European Union mission, oh, we appointed a committee.
Yeah.
What they didn't tell the Europeans is that the committee has not met even once.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And there's no meeting set. Because I have for various personal and other reasons, I have an interest in this subject.
Okay.
So I've been pursuing this, and I've talked to 2 members of the committee,
Okay.
and they say, no,
Okay.
we have never met. So what I'm saying is, and I communicated with Mr. Arthakul Ratna, who's the chairman, and I said, if 26 is coming,
Yeah.
you need to get this done by 25.
Right.
So you have, I would say, about 2 months, maximum 3, but I would say 2, to finish the committee's work. Then you have to run it through Attorney General, legal draftsman, constitutional review because somebody is going to go to the Supreme Court or blah, blah, blah. Now we'll be in December.
So basically, Professor, what you're saying is you need to package it.
Get it done.
Done.
And then come 2026, you make a big fuss about it. We've done it.
Yeah.
Finally. Compared to any no other government was able to do it. We did it.
Yeah.
Now I'll tell you what is holding them back.
Okay.
What is holding them back is, no, I don't know, should I call it the deep state? Even the word deep state has got a bad meaning now.
Yeah.
But there are people in the forces, in the security apparatus,
Okay.
who exert pressure on ministers of justice.
Okay.
Because I was in one-on-one negotiations with the former Minister of Justice, Mr. Vijayadas Rajapaksa, and I said, look at this, you're a lawyer, I'm a lawyer. This particular thing doesn't make any sense. Can you take it out?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, I know, but you don't understand the pressure that I'm under.
Okay. Okay.
He's under pressure.
Okay.
In the same way, whoever is responsible for this subject in the government is under pressure from either the police or the TID or the three-letter organizations.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you noticed that all over the world the intelligence boys go in three letters.
3 letters.
CIA, NSA, TID,
FSB.
FSB. There's some unwritten rule that they have to be 3 letters.
Yes. Probably that's the international standard.
RAW, R-A-W.
Absolutely.
3 letters.
Yeah.
Right?
No, we have one exception.
Oh.
FCID. That's a
No,
4.
they're not. They're not serious. They're not terrorist investigators. They're just.
They're just there.
Yeah. No, they're there to investigate financial crimes.
Yeah.
This intelligence machine.
Machines. It's the acronyms are always
Yeah,
three.
they must be putting enormous pressure on the government. I sympathize with the government, but what's the point of having this kind of mandate without being able to withstand the pressure?
But Professor, if you look at that, if you take that argument in, right? For example, I'll just go through with some numbers, right? 18.5% of all our exports go to the EU, right? I think total exports are to the EU is about 1.3 billion euros. All big numbers.
Take.
Yeah. So thing is, Professor, for example, Pakistan is compliant because Pakistan, with all their problems, what's currently going on.
That's what I don't understand. How can they be compliant?
Exactly, that's the thing. Pakistan is exporting 6 billion. And that's the highest out of all the GSP, the 8 countries, the highest is Pakistan. Second is Kyrgyzstan, and then it's us.
Wow.
And then it's the Philippines. Philippines is third, 2 billion, and then Sri Lanka is 1.3 billion. Right. But the thing is, okay.
In terms of the economies,
Yeah.
probably the impact is higher on us.
Absolutely.
Because those are big countries.
Those are big countries, bigger economies.
Yeah.
And their manufacturing sector is more diversified.
Yeah.
And they have regional trade because Sri Lanka is an island.
Yeah.
Right. So they have a lot of cross-border stuff that actually happens that doesn't even get recorded. So both of us agree that the impact is more. But the thing is, Professor, if they don't go and rectify this and we lose it, last time in 2010, I think dozens of factories basically shut down.
Yeah.
Right? And if that happens now, especially after coming out of a crisis, especially when the economy was in doldrums till recently, we are going to go back to where we were. Because the apparel sectors, especially the apparel sector, impact on the economy is huge. Because it's not only the employee who works there; it has impact on the guy who actually provides the vehicles for transport. It has the maintenance people, the guys who actually do the cooking and of the canteens and all that. It's a massive ecosystem that completely is dependent on this. So don't you think the government is actually playing with fire? If they just kind of say no, okay, we can't do this. And suddenly this happens and suddenly overnight we lose it. Don't you think that, that's actually a security risk, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also we need to sort of take the two events. 2010, what kind of context were we dealing with in 2010? And, not 2010. The way the Europeans work is they give you a sort of, a warning, and they give you time and then another meeting. It's not like Trump.
Right. They phase it out.
Yeah. With Trump, people with valid contracts.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a contract. I got a stop work order. I mean, this is like completely against
Overnight it goes.
all rules of normal, decent human behavior, right?
Yeah.
Europeans are not like that. They give you time,
Yeah, yeah,
time, warning. These are last chance, please.
yeah,
And so remember, though, this process with what happened in 2010 would have happened from like about 2008 or something, right? Now, this is the end of the war. This is when the government was going gung ho and
yeah.
we're going to finish off the LTTE, and then
Exactly.
it went into their heads,
Yeah.
and they thought they were really powerful,
Yeah.
and so on. So the context is different from the government side.
Right.
Now we should have a much more humble
Yeah.
and realistic government
Absolutely.
now.
Yeah.
I mean, here basically we can't pay our bills yet. We can't. We are not sure.
No.
Right? We are not
Yeah.
making our debt repayments right
Absolutely.
now. So we should be a little more realistic. So I'm saying on the government side it's different. And then also, I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the apparel industry has changed.
Yeah.
The apparel industry then was, they had grown up during the multi-fiber agreement and the quotas.
Yeah.
The quotas had gone, but they were kind of comfortable with this model. They were within Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Now the thing is, a lot of people don't understand that our apparel industry is kind of, well, they have diversified their risks.
Absolutely.
They're not here. They're here in Vietnam, in Ethiopia, in God knows where, India.
Absolutely, Professor. It's like the car industry. Toyota, the double cabs are manufactured in Thailand.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, only the premium edition, the Land Cruisers are made in Japan. It's the same with every other car manufacturer.
So our apparel guys, actually, I can say that directly. I mean, if the garments are not, if the fabric has not been cut, right, it can be shipped very quickly to a factory that they own
Okay.
in a country with lower tariffs.
Right. Okay.
There will be a short-term loss, but in the reshipping and so on. But it can then come out from Vietnam. It can come out from India.
Can come out from Bangladesh.
Because there are factories that
yeah.
these guys, our apparel industry owns, right? I mean, they're not purely Sri Lankan. Even if they can't do that, they can give it to somebody else,
Yeah. So
right? I
basically,
mean, they enter into a contract with another company and says, you guys got lower, I mean, I don't know, there might be a factory in Kyrgyzstan for all I know.
Yeah.
Ship it to Kyrgyzstan, it comes out of Kyrgyzstan and you uses a GSP plus advantage.
Yeah.
Right? Companies are like that. Because I can remember in 2017, I was looking to see, we had some kind of bicycle making factory. A factory that was in the zone that was making bicycles. They got a huge investment from Hero Honda, the Indian company. And I was just following up and trying to find out what this was about. They said, oh, you're getting GSP plus. That's why we are investing here.
Right.
Instead of shipping bicycles from India, we're going to ship them from Sri Lanka. Right? And quite a number of the components might have come from India or some other place, like our apparel.
Yeah.
Quite a number of the intermediate products come from there.
Absolutely.
But you gain the advantage of that.
Yeah.
So what we have to realize is that the world has changed.
Absolutely. Actually, Professor, you got a good point because I was actually having this conversation with a friend of mine, one of my college mates, and he's in the apparel industry. So what he said is basically the value addition that happens in Sri Lanka is roughly about 20%. Give or take, he said it's 20%. So the scenario, there is no, I mean, so you're only playing with 20% end of the day, which means on the supply chain side, it's not critical that you need to come here.
Yeah.
Because if it's a massive component, let's say if it's 50-50, then maybe you can't shift it to some other place. And because obviously with the global supply chain, there are particular timelines you need to meet. But if it's 20%, I'm pretty sure if things are getting put together here, then they can move out.
Well, not only that, but you got to realize the differences between, say, the auto industry
Yeah.
and the apparel industry. I mean,
Yeah.
auto industry, when Trump is doing all this crazy stuff,
Yeah.
they can't go and set up a new production line. Like,
Absolutely, yeah.
or they can't turn on a dime. That's 2 years of investment, right?
Correct.
Apparel is not like that. And what I'm telling you is that the apparel, I mean, We think we are a big apparel exporter, but we are tiny
Yeah.
compared to China, which is the largest
Yes.
apparel exporter into
To the US.
to the
US,
US.
yeah.
We are like, I don't know,
Yeah.
number maybe not even in the top 10, right? We are
Possibly.
so small.
Yeah.
So all those factories exist, right? All that has happened to happen is if any of those countries has got a tariff rate more advantageous than ours, going into Europe, the raw material goes there,
Yeah.
the work gets done,
Yeah.
boom.
Absolutely. Because another thing that just comes to my mind, before the big three or the big four in Sri Lanka, what we have now, there was another company that was actually, they are the people who actually pioneered this. I think it was TriStar. All right. And what happened was TriStar,
Gone.
gone. It just vanished overnight.
TriStar was big.
Big.
In President Premdas's time. It was the
Absolutely.
flagship.
It was the flagship project.
Nobody knows about it.
Absolutely. I think the gentleman who ran it was, I think,
Devapura.
Kumar Devapura, correct. And it just vanished overnight.
Yep.
Because I think we used to get those quotas those days. And when they started to dry up, he couldn't keep up.
Yep.
So, Professor, I'm just saying on a, let's say, social issue, right? Let's say if the government, again, I'm just going back to that question again, if it's not taken seriously and, like what you said, the whole thing can be packaged in 3 months, tops, don't you think there's going to be a massive social impact? And that's going to be the biggest worry for Sri Lanka for the next, I don't know, maybe for the next decade or so.
Well, I mean, look, when we look at things like this, right, losing export markets, what we have to understand is sort of the implications. What you're asking is social implications.
Yeah.
Social implications means job losses.
Yeah. And plus the classical case, the salaries that go with it. So because some people will argue saying, okay, if you are getting, as you rightly said before, if you are getting concessions and all that, and if the companies are making money, we should get a cut out of it. So there's two ways to kind of look at it.
That's very difficult because you see, I mean, there's no factory, as far as I know, that is from, permanently supplying the European market.
Yeah.
One day they get an order to supply the European market.
Correct.
Another day they get an order to supply, I don't know, Japan or Australia or
Absolutely.
something. So what are they going to do? Like here, during this period, you give a salary premium. During this period, you don't. I mean, the trade unions come up with this story.
That's the mentality of the trade unions.
But I think what they need to think about is not in terms of salaries, but in terms of jobs, right? More jobs or fewer jobs? That's the real equation. Fewer jobs means will those particular companies, I don't think when TriStar went out of business, they were able to do the TEVA gratuity payments and so on. TriStar just crashed.
Yeah, when factories crash, they just crash.
They don't do
overnight.
TEVA, they don't do anything.
Yeah, there's nothing left.
Right? So the workers who are there will have various rights on paper, and the labor department will jump up and down and say you have to do this and you have to do that. But when the company is basically bust, there's nothing that can be done.
Absolutely, because the thing is, the bank will own the property.
Right.
So
that's done. Then you have the whole ecosystem of the boardings, the food suppliers, the transport
drivers,
suppliers, etc. That whole structure will get hit, right? So what you can expect is not only, I mean, we'll come back to the question of the loss of dollars or euros and what kind of implications it can have. But in addition to that, you'll have essentially the economic growth in the country will go down because we have high unemployment, people unable to pay taxes, etc. Right? The value-added tax of those that came from those shut down businesses, the government is not going to collect.
Right.
So the government's revenue targets will be difficult to meet. And now that there are less dollars coming into the country, right? What should happen technically is that the rupee should depreciate, right? So the government will need more rupees to buy the required dollars,
Yeah.
because by 2027
Yeah.
we need to be
start paying the debt
paying
back.
the debt. So now they'll need. So on one side, the rupees that they were hoping, the 15%,
Yeah.
that IMF model, this much
Yeah.
uh, uh, government revenue was coming in,
Correct.
and with that money we were going to keep 2.3%,
Yes.
the primary surplus,
Yes.
and with the primary surplus we were going to
Do the repayment.
do the repayment.
Yeah.
Now, if we can't make the 2.3, we are in trouble. Number one.
Yes.
And what we can do with the 2.3 of GDP in rupees that the government has collected is going to be less in terms of dollars, because A, the GDP is going down or not growing,
Yeah.
and the dollars that we can buy with the rupees will be less,
Yes.
right? Because there's a market for dollars.
Yes. Absolutely.
So that means that I would think that we could be looking at the second default very quickly because of these two factors.
So that means the possibility of a second default would actually become ripe if this matter is not taken care
Absolutely,
immediately.
that's what I'm saying. Because you see, the IMF model, a very conservative model, and a model that even I don't like, because all it gives you is like 3% growth,
Yes.
right? So I think we need to do better than that.
Yeah.
And there are many people who say that even with 15% government revenue, we can't pull it off, right? It's got to be better than
Absolutely,
that.
yes.
But now what this is going to do is we can't even meet the revenue targets,
Yeah.
and we can't keep the dollar where it is, right? So even staying within the IMF model is going to be difficult. I mean, we're looking at a second default. Bottom line, that's my problem. That's why I would take this very, very seriously.
Okay. Professor, we have a couple of questions that have come in. Some of the questions have, you have already answered some of them, so I won't go into that. But there's a question asking that if, for example, if Sri Lanka actually loses GSP plus, is there anything that the government can do to kind of mitigate and kind of look into have a B plan per se, saying, okay, obviously the factories are going to close. Can anything be kind of repurposed? Is there anything the government can do at that level?
Well, again, I have been advocating for a long time that we reduce our reliance on these two markets.
So basically diversify your exports. New
So Jaff will say, what rubbish, you don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. This is where our because we do export sort of high value items. We're not
Yeah.
exporting t-shirts.
Correct.
I think it was Rehana Taufik who gave some numbers recently.
Yeah.
I don't want to steal her thunder. She was saying that pretty much everybody else's sort of per item cost is less than $1, while ours is about $4.
Yeah.
We are selling
Yeah.
apparel
Premium,
into
yeah.
the US, premium products.
Premium products, yes.
Right? So they're saying there's no market for these premium products in other countries. I beg to disagree, because I think the Europe the big economic driver of demand is Asia.
Absolutely.
We got the population, etc., and we shouldn't get confused by the 1.3 billion people who are in India. We should think of the top 10% of that,
Yeah.
1.3, who are capable of buying
Anything you can imagine.
anything you can imagine,
Yeah.
right? So if you target to that, and I think one of the companies actually had a brand that was doing very well. There was a brand that was,
Avanti, was it?
that's it,
Yeah.
Amanti,
Yeah.
targeted to India, and they did very well.
Yeah.
So I think we need to really look at the Asian markets.
Yeah.
It's true that they are, again, in a very simplistic view of the world, you say, okay, they are exporters of apparel, why the hell would they buy from us?
Okay.
But no, that's not how trade
How it
works.
Yeah.
Certain lines we sell into India. Certain lines we buy from India.
India.
Right?
That's how trade works, yeah.
Even within the same HS code,
Yeah.
you can have things going in both directions.
Correct.
So what I think is, there's this thing in economics called the gravity model.
Yeah.
gravity model means the natural thing is that nearby, most of your goods trade should be with nearby countries. We have been defying gravity all this time because most of our goods trade, at least the exports,
Absolutely.
is with faraway places, as
Absolutely,
far away
yeah.
as you can get. I
imagine,
mean,
yeah.
we could be exporting to Chile.
Yeah.
That's about
Okay. As far as you can get.
but we are exporting to US, right? So let's not do that. Let's start following the gravity, the laws of gravity, and come back to Asia. But I do realize that in the short term, it's going to be difficult. But this is the way people talked even when the quotas were going. Oh my God, without the quotas, we can't do anything. That's tough. Let's get it done.
And on the export model process, just another question that I just want to kind of pinch it in. Normally, if you take any product in the world, in end of the day, it's not the product that sells; it's a brand. Do you think Sri Lanka has been very on our marketing side that we never develop brands, and because of that, we are producing the best of the best. But the problem is, the best of the best is someone else's brand.
Yep.
Do you think Sri Lanka? I mean, for example, Amanti is a good question, good case study to bring. They at least what they did was they probably did the same thing what they're doing to the export market. But only thing is they created their own brand, and the brand carries the premium.
Because otherwise, this whatever we send to the US at an average price of $4.
Yeah.
Average of 4 means some things are below 4 and some things are 20.
Yeah.
But the items that are going into the US are selling for $200.
Yes.
That's how the game gets
Game
played.
is going exactly.
The distributor, the retailer,
Absolutely.
the brand owner.
Yeah.
Victoria's Secret is making most of the money.
Absolutely.
So I think people need to bite the
Yeah.
bullet and say we need to start developing our own brands.
And Professor, the best case is what actually happened in China. When the American tariffs came, the Chinese manufacturers who were making the Gucci bags and all that, they are selling it for $50,000. It just takes $1,300 to make this.
There you go.
So
Right?
that's a real number.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, these are challenges,
Yeah.
but I mean, what is a crisis? What use is a crisis?
Yeah.
Unless it makes us stretch and do things. So all this time we were talking about what governments can do, but governments don't export, right? Government, it's private sector firms that export.
Correct.
So they also have to say, we are taking this very seriously, and capital is capital, capitalists are capitalists, companies are companies.
Yeah.
They can easily move their apparel activities to Ethiopia or someplace,
Yeah.
and still
Correct.
make their money. But they might think, we have certain things, certain design facilities, research and development, certain
Yeah.
particular advantages that have been built up here in this country,
Yeah.
and maybe they can leverage it to extend into marketing and branding as well, and do that high value business. Quite a lot of these firms, I think, benefited from the removal of the quotas.
And Professor, just one more thing that I want to bring because we are kind of running out of time. I think we are in our last 5 minutes. One thing is like if you take Sri Lanka's exports, it's not diversified. It's, for example, every time most of the time what we speak about is actually about the apparel industry. But we do quite a bit of industrial tires for Michelin and all that. Do you think that Sri Lanka really got it wrong? Because where they actually got it wrong is that they didn't diversify their exports. They didn't have more products going out, where they just concentrated on one industry and started to kind of really scaling it up. Why I'm saying that is because then basically because if some problem happens like what we're facing now, then it becomes a real issue. And why do you think?
Yeah.
Why do you think it never happened?
Why do I think it never happened?
Lack of entrepreneurship, or is it?
Yeah. I think it's that. But then again, the issue is this, right? Now, actually, I wore this shirt for a reason. For this conversation, because I bought this in the US.
Okay. Made in Sri Lanka.
It's made in Sri Lanka, but not only made in Sri Lanka. It's a brand, some Eagle, American Eagle or
American
something,
Eagle,
right?
yeah, it's a big brand in the
Right?
US, yeah.
But it also says that it's a special fabric
Okay.
that moves the sweat away from the body.
Okay.
It's sort of not just cotton,
Yeah. It's one of those breathing, whatever you
something
call
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
Right? So I think what we've done is within a particular industry, our people have been innovative and done interesting and useful things. But it's unreasonable to expect a company that is good at doing tires or apparel to be suddenly doing electronics. That's not how the world works, right? So it's that these other companies that had to get in, they either didn't have the basic elements, access to capital, etc. Right? If you look at these companies, they had access to capital through conglomerates and so on and so forth, right? Or they had foreign investors. That was a very important thing for a lot of apparel companies. They had the foreign investors back then.
Back then, yeah. I
Right?
mean, Martin Trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So if we can unlock those doors for people to come in, and then, nobody thinks of Sri Lanka as a country that exports bicycles. But in fact, we actually export bicycles.
Yes.
Right? So that's really what we got to do.
Yeah.
So the Export Development Board, instead of sitting on its backside and doing various things, whatever they do, they should say we're going to ask these people, what are the barriers that you face? These new sectors. These areas in trade agreements that we don't use. So many of our trade agreements, even the agreement that we have with India, we don't use all the lines, right? We can export more under the trade agreement, but we don't.
And Professor, we don't have to manufacture the final product. I mean, we can just manufacture, for example, Sri Lanka has a competitive advantage on rubber because we have rubber here. Plus,
We're short of rubber.
We are
right
short
now.
of rubber now because now they're actually importing it. But the thing is, the rubber industry, they make industrial tires,
Yeah.
which are very sophisticated, which have very high safety standards because, they are used in aircraft and all that. So, I mean, they don't have to make a full end product. For example, I was having this conversation with another person from the automotive industry, and they were saying, yeah, probably we can do the rubber bushings, for example, that go into the suspension.
That's right.
Right? Things like that. But the thing is that never happened. I mean, that was always a big question to me, right? Why didn't the guys who are in the rubber industry, why aren't they not talking to, for example, the big boys in India?
That's the point. Chennai is a lot of people don't understand.
Coimbatore.
Chennai has become a major automotive manufacturing facility.
Actually, Professor, it's Chennai and plus there's another town called Coimbatore.
Massive. Some
Massive.
people are saying this could be larger than Detroit,
Absolutely.
or it has already become, or will become.
Yes.
So what we should then think of is, now you go back to that original question.
Yes.
What are we supposed to do? We should look at how do we integrate ourselves into the value chains in Asia, right?
Is it the government's job or is it the private sector's job?
Both.
Okay.
Because as long as we have these tariffs and
Yeah.
all that rubbish that we have, right?
Cess and this.
Cess and somebody was saying cess reminds me of a cesspit.
Yeah.
What is a cesspit about? It's about where the waste goes. Get rid of the cess.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we should do.
Okay.
So integrate ourselves into the Indian value chains. What do we have to do? Comprehensive economic partnership or ETCA or whatever name you want to call it, get integrated, right? That will be more important because I think today's news was the finalization of the UK-India agreement. I haven't seen the details, but that's a big story.
It is.
It's a big story. Every time, so you see trade agreements, a lot of people don't see this. I mean, I can remember the Chinese guys who were talking to me of all people, what do I know, saying, we're very supportive of your India trade agreement because we'd like to come.
Yeah.
We'd like to come here
Yeah.
and use your trade agreement
Absolutely.
to get into the Indian market, right? So what we should think is now these fellows have got some kind of deal with the UK. How can we integrate ourselves into that market and have some things going? We put in some intermediate products into Indian exports into the UK. My fear, however, is that because of this Trump madness, that the rules of origin issue
Will
is
come
going to
into question.
become
Yeah,
more
yes.
serious.
Yeah.
And it'll become more complicated.
Yeah, and they
They'll
really
start
to
poking
poking
into
and digging. Yeah,
and even what we used to do might
might come under scrutiny.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So, challenges on all
yeah,
sides, government as well as the private sector. But it's not just the governments,
yeah,
and it's definitely not only the private
private
sectors.
sector.
And it's not only just the big boys,
Yes.
the ones who are already exporting,
Correct.
but the people who are not exporting. How do we bring them into the picture?
Thank you, Professor.
Pleasure.
So, folks, thank you for staying with us for I think nearly 45 to 50 minutes, and hope to see you next week. Good night.